Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, with the release of the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion, there's been a pretty large shift to what weapons are considered good in Elden Ring, what weapons are great, and a lot of people either just have the wrong idea about some of the older weapons that are much better than they thought they were, or things have just actually been buffed by something else that was added within the DLC. Or hey, even weapons that are new with the DLC have just been underrated and considered weaker than they actually are, because people just didn't really know how to build around them properly. So today we're going to talk about a collection of these kinds of weapons that are worth properly taking the moment to actually check out and possibly even try yourself, because you might find something that you'll really enjoy just playing the game with. Starting off then, let's talk about the antspur rapier, and I know what you're going to be saying here. People know this weapon can do some fun and actually powerful things, like applying scarlet rot and frost on the same weapon, or scarlet rot and poison, things like that, but for the most part, I'm just using this as an example of poison and rot applying weapons getting stronger as a whole in general, because you may not realize just how much stronger these actually have gotten on top of their prior power, especially with antspur rapier, because you can apply poison affinity to it, which makes it apply both rot and poison. And then the main thing that this combos with is the new poisoned hand weapon you can have in your offhand, and this gives you a damage buff after you apply a poison if you do so, as well as the new Ash of War, the poison flower blooms twice, which does a ton of bonus damage when the enemy has either poison or rot as a status applied to them. And with the two debuffs being juggled separately on antspur rapier specifically, they tend to apply at different times and boost this on separate uses, just allowing for a real fun combo and chaining of it all, applying the statuses back to back, consuming them one after the other. Second up then, let's talk about the Sword of Light and the Sword of Darkness, two legendary weapons in the DLC. Recently we put up a whole build focused around using these two things together, and these are new in the DLC, but most people just sort of wrote them off pretty much immediately as not being very good. However, after a bunch of testing, I found that actually wasn't really the case, provided that you knew how to build around them. If you go for a super high faith build instead of going with strength, which is sure a bit unintuitive, as the weapon tells you it has worse faith scaling than it does strength scaling, but that boosts the holy damage of the weapon specifically if you do faith, and that raises the damage of both weapon skills a fair amount too, as they are holy based. The better of the two, honestly, being the Sword of Darkness with the skill that it has, as far as the raw damage that it deals, but the big thing that these do is the Sword of Light gives you a 20% bonus to holy damage done for 60 seconds after using the skill, and the Sword of Darkness's skill makes any enemy that is hit take 20% bonus holy damage from you. So together this is around a 40% damage increase if you use both of these to any holy damage that you deal. Add on to that, you can use these together with things like other short swords that have holy damage on them, and suddenly you have power stance, fast attacking, massively buffed holy melee weapons. Or you can just use the darkness skill as a main focus if you want to, or just use holy incantations once you've really messed with the damage negations. There's honestly various ways to build around this, but the point is you want to use these with a proper faith build, not in a strength build. Third up then, we have the bloodfiends fork, another new DLC weapon. This one has been significantly underestimated from the get-go simply because of its counterpart, bloodfiends arm. Bloodfiends arm is a big colossal bleed applying weapon that applies insane amounts of status buildup ridiculously quick, on top of already having a high physical damage stat to begin with and scaling quite well with that. But then there is also bloodfiends fork, a slightly less unique but thematically similar weapon that is just a straight up spear. Because the bleed buildup is less and the damage is less and it doesn't have a unique attack like the arm, people just sort of thought it was bad, but that is actually far from the truth. It just fills a very different niche. Build this thing up to be a blood loss application machine, and then it is a pierce damage weapon, which means that you can use the counterattack mechanic in the spear talisman to boost it, put it behind a shield, and now you have a guard poke build that does counterattacks with super high bleed buildup. The weapon is honestly extremely good. It's just much more niche in its actual power than the bloodfiends arm is, which has made it go a little bit unnoticed. Fourth today then, we have Freyja's greatsword. This is a new curved greatsword. You can get this after the big NPC brawl of the DLC if you have completed her story steps before that, and because this weapon doesn't have a unique skill, it actually feels like most people have just assumed it is bad as a result of that. I mean, even if you upgraded it to see what the scaling turns up with at maximum upgrades, you might think it's just sort of okay, it's alright. But the trick to this one is in a bit of extra bonus text on its actual description. Having this equipped gives you a 10% boost to any weapon skill that is considered a red main battle skill. Flame of the Red Mains, Flaming Strike, Lion's Claw, and Savage Lion's Claw, which is the new one to the DLC, and 3 of the 4 of these are honestly well known for being incredibly good Ashes of War in their own builds. Lion's Claw being a personal favorite of mine, mine, and even if you don't use this weapon as the actual bearer of the Ash of War itself, you can leave it on and then two-hand a bigger weapon with the skill to still give it the 10% bonus damage, which makes this weapon a bit of a sleeper bonus for a setup like this, even if you aren't actually using it to deal the damage. Fifth up then, let's talk about the Bone Bow. This one is located at the bottom of this spire in Ballarat Tower right here, and this is quite an interesting short bow, all things considered. I mean, I won't try and tell you that this is one of the strongest weapons in the whole game or anything like that, but it is honestly extremely potent for a short bow. It does suffer from the damage constraints that short bows have, but it has a unique skill, rank or shot, that enters a stance like the barrage skill for other bows, and lets you rapidly fire either of your arrow slots with a tracking homing effect on the projectile, which is unique to this skill, which makes it far more likely to actually hit your target, especially in things like a boss fight where enemies are darting around, purposefully dodging, or just moving actively constantly. This is also great, especially for things like players in PvP, NPC type enemies, or even just for applying statuses early on in a boss fight in unusual situations against bosses. For example, like loosing a ton of frost arrows into Messmer before he even lands with his orb, as an example. As well, you can use things like storm arrows, which actually have been boosted in the DLC by unique interaction with the new Enraged Divine Beast talisman. Sixth then, we have the Shadow Sunflower Blossom, and this one is weirdly recognized as just being relatively good, but I want to shout this one out because I think even with that, the reality is that it's just far, far better than just good. It's honestly fantastic. This is one of the better faith scaling weapons, especially for a big chunky boy, and its actual AR is really quite high when you have the right stats with it, making every weapon hit that you do with this quite chunky and quite damaging. It has a fast hitting heavy attack, and the weapon skill itself is very strong too, dealing a ton of holy damage, but also having incredibly high amounts of hyper armor, letting you sort of trade and power through with an up to 4-hit combo if you use all the follow-up attacks, which also do a fairly large amount of poise damage. This could also be doing around 20% more damage than it is in this clip if you added on the Sword of Light body buff before a fight as well, as it's majoritarily holy damage on the skill itself too. Finally then, let's talk about another personal favorite of mine then from the base game, the Magma Whip Candlestick. This thing is funky as hell, such a just creative design for a weapon. It's a whip, and the skill fires out just a shower of magma that then sits on the ground and deals damage to anything that happens to stand in it. As you may know if you've seen our other similar recent videos about the DLC, a new talisman was added in with the expansion called the Talisman of the Dread. This boosts all magma damage that you do by 15%, and given it's in the name of the weapon itself, that does of course actually apply to this weapon and its skill to increase the damage by a pretty large chunk. Fire damage as well gained even more avenues to power in the expansion with things like the oil-soaked tier to reduce enemies' fire negation, so there's actually quite a bit going on to make this more powerful than it was in the base game as well, and it was already pretty underrated before it gained even more bonuses too. That just about does it for today then everyone, just a collection of underrated weapons that I think more people should check out and actually try using in Elden Ring and its DLC. These aren't all going to be absolute powerhouses that one-shot bosses, that's not why we're talking about them. They are all, however, really solid when put into the right situations or built around in the correct way, and they're all honestly very fun to use, especially if you have never given a second thought to actually trying any of these properly in the past. I hope you've enjoyed this then, and let me know down in the comments below if there are any other weapons that you think deserve shouting out just like this for these exact reasons. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.